Welcome to the very first episode of Inception, where we plant ideas of wealth. My name is Lalendle Makubane, and I'm welcoming you on this wonderful journey that we are taking as I try to educate, teach, and inspire you on the things that I know and the things that I've learned. Do remember that none of the videos that I post constitute as financial advice. If you are looking for financial advice, please seek somebody who is registered with the FSCA and accredited by them. So, today's episode, I want to talk a bit about wealth. That's right, you heard me right. Wealth. I love the word wealth, and I'll actually tell you where this discussion is coming from. So, a few days ago, I got a call from one of my friends. We've been friends for a very long time. And he tells me his plans and he says that he has this X amount of money and he wants to invest and he wants to make money and become rich. So I told him what he needs to do, and also I observed that people do not understand that there is a distinction between rich and wealthy. So the difference between rich and wealthy is what I decided that I will talk about. And I'll talk about the hallmarks of wealth. In my mind, there are 5 ways to build, accumulate, and create wealth, but also live wealthy. Now, a lot of people who are and have never been exposed to wealth often don't understand this, that there is actually a science to wealth accumulation. It's different to being rich, and I'll explain that in a moment. But there is a science, there is a methodology, a process to accumulating, living, storing, and having access to wealth. So I'm going to give you 5 very quick hallmarks about how wealth works. This is based, by the way, on my own personal experience and my experience working with people who are wealthy from all over the place. And it's also based on the acquaintances that I have of wealthy people, not only from here, but somewhere far, far, far away, even overseas, if I may say that. So, over the past number of years, I've watched them, studied them, and sometimes you don't need somebody to sign on a piece of paper saying they are your mentor for you to learn the lessons. You can learn even from a distance. The best learning, I think, often happens by observation. So, what are these attributes or hallmarks of wealth? The first one is that wealthy people understand OPM. OPM, other people's money. Now, before you can get access to other people's money, you have to prove yourself as a good, as someone might say, you have to prove yourself a good steward. You have to prove that you are a custodian. And the way to do this is to first manage your own finances well, but OPM, other people's money, is the idea that you can leverage and utilize other people's money for an exponential upside and gain, and that you participate in that upside or the gain. So, study the history of those who've built really, really huge and large businesses in South Africa or in the world. So, here in South Africa, we talk about somebody, for instance, like Adrian Gore, who raised 100 million rands when he started what is now known as Discovery Insurance, Discovery Investments, but Discovery the company. So why raise 100 million rand from funds for funds to start Discovery? Because even though he was creating wealth, he understood that OPM would take him to his destination far quicker than trying to save money and do it himself. So, first, you need a good character. Second, you need a track record. And the best track record is managing yourself and your money well. Third, you need a credible story. Without a credible story about how you're going to multiply that cash, no one is going to trust you with their money. And here's a mistake that a lot of people make, and I see and I have heard of them, is that a lot of people think that the wealthy are stupid and they do not know what they are doing. So, what are the odds that somebody who has accumulated wealth doesn't think logically and doesn't know how to manage their money? So, if you're approaching somebody who has money, consider for a moment that they might actually know what they are doing. That means you need to know what you are doing really, really well. You need to understand it in detail and draft down every question that might be asked from the discussion and prep yourself for those. You can't approach high net worth individuals and think you're just going to take a shot, a wing at them. No, you've got to be utterly prepared. So, character, track record, and deep technical knowledge of what it is that you're doing. So, the first hallmark of creating wealth is OPM, other people's money. Now, as you know, from the different things that we do and the different things that I am involved in, I come across these type of things, and it is something that I do understand and I know very, very well. So, the second part of it, or the second hallmark, is that wealthy people understand this better than even people who are rich, is that the function of money is to buy time. That's it. The function of money is to buy time, not to buy goods or properties or cars or things that you can show off on Instagram, in your village, or your friends, or whatever. The function of money is just to buy time. Now, you might be listening to this thinking, how on earth do I buy time? Well, you do a few things. The first is you have to reduce your burn rate. What's burn rate? Burn rate is the rate at which you burn your cash, your spending. Now, usually what happens, and forgive me for using these type of people, but it usually happens from people who have salary. And I do respect them, no harm on that. But it happens to people who tend to have access to funds on a regular basis. They increase their burn rate because of the more money they earn. And they end up taking or getting into larger credit agreements, buying new stuff, new assets that they absolutely convince themselves that they need. They indebt themselves to the absolute hilt, and they cannot live without the next paycheck. Wealthy people buy time. So rather than spend money, they keep money because they understand having it buys them time. Time to do what? Well, time to take a year's sabbatical and not and not have to worry about losing anything. Time to take a 6-month holiday and not worrying about the next paycheck or where it's going to come from. I hope this makes sense. So, wealth is about shifting your mindset from spending money by reducing your burn rate and buying time. Now, what I'm going to say next is going to offend some people, and one of the hallmarks one of the hallmarks of how to spot a wealthy person. Some of you are not going to like this, but wealthy people very rarely drive the latest model of any car. Very rarely. It's unusual. They generally drive a car that's 2 or 3 models older. Why? Remember when we were kids growing up, we used to watch movies or things that would show the Queen of England driving a Range Rover. So how come it wasn't the latest Range Rover? Hmm? What does the Queen know that you and I need to learn? You know what the Queen knows? She knows this. Money talks, wealth whispers. So they always drive 2 models old, nothing new. And don't get me wrong, it might be an S-Class, it might be a BMW, it might be a Range Rover, a Jaguar, but it always 2 models old. So the second hallmark then of creating wealth is that you want to lower your burn rate. The third, you need to be aware of, if you want to create wealth, is that you need to, and this is important, you need to have access to assets that are generating cash. Here's what people get wrong first. You're told to have money to buy assets. That's half the story. The real story is have money to buy assets that themselves make more money. So the idea is that you want your liquidity to generate new forms of liquidity. The real problem you should be having is that you should own so many income generating, free cash flow generating assets that you worry is how you are going to put that money into other structures that are efficient from all sorts of costs. So you want to really understand this idea of having liquidity. And to have liquidity, having access to assets that themselves generate cash. There are people that I know who have a problem of how they're going to spend their money because they're generating more money than they have. So the real question should be, how do I own assets whose assets generate even more cash? The fourth hallmark about people that really know how to generate and create wealth, they are very good at taking advice. Very, very good. They pay wealth managers, wealth planners, investment advisors, certified financial planners millions to manage their portfolios. Can you just think about this logically? If someone who's worth 100 million rands is willing to pay millions to somebody to manage their 100 million, and we all agree that it's unlikely and it's not possible, but it is unlikely for you to really make 100 million rand in liquid assets unless you've got brains of a god or brains of a lord. If someone is worth that kind of money and they are willing to take advice, what are the odds that you and me shouldn't be taking advice too? What do they know that we should find out? Taking advice is a fundamental part of how you create wealth. Not all advice is the same, but we should listen to everybody the same way. And taking advice is a fundamental part of how you do. And finally, what's the final way to create wealth? To accumulate, manage wealth. Well, this is the easiest if you are a person with a high center and a self-control. It is the hardest if you're not. And that's this. If you want to accumulate wealth, you have to do it for you. It's interesting, and isn't it that we live in a time, in an era where something isn't true unless we have proven to the world that it is true. So you want to accumulate wealth, you want money. It has to be for you. You've read stories about how some of the wealthiest people in the world will drive a car that they've had for decades, or live in a home that they've lived in for decades, or they'll have spending habits which are quite obscure. In fact, you know it's out of this mind or out of this world. If you think about it, it's because that wealth is for them. It's not for the world. It's not for everybody else. These are, in my mind, the 5 things that you need to know and understand if you want to create wealth. I'd like to pause here for the moment, but I want to assure you that they are easy, and I guarantee you they are very, very hard to do. But for you guys, listeners of this podcast, my wonderful audience, I know that you will listen and you will hear that there is a difference between rich and wealthy. So here's the real question. How much time can you buy today? From me, Tlalentle Makubane, Lwazi HD, and taking your time to listen to this. Thank you. See you again on the next episode.